Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hearing News. With us tonight, former Mayor of Dunedin, Green Party member, person who we thought might run for Parliament one day, but he'd never give us that lowdown, Aaron Hawkins. Sir, good evening to you. Welcome to the show.
Kia ora, Pat. Thanks for having me. I saw what looked like a very intellectual gentleman wearing a Big Hearing News hoodie in the sweatshirt yesterday. And I thought, oh, that's rather lovely. And then I got a message from you this morning asking me to be on the show. So, he tohu. It's a sign.
It is a sign. Now,
I don't feel hirsute enough now, though. I feel like I'm really letting the team down. So apologies, I didn't give you that warning in advance.
It's all right. We've got enough here to share around for everybody. Just for people to know, Chewy has got some family business on this week and he was never going to be here tonight or Monday night. He's back tomorrow night. There's a bunch of people, Aaron, who no matter what celebrity superstar guest we have on, like yourself, they just turn on and they say, oh no, Chewy, and they just leave. If I'm here by myself, they just leave. That's how they roll. They're Chewyites.
How big is this family?
Oh, it's huge. Ginormous. Enormous. But thanks for jumping in. Really, in fact, I appreciate you, and Clint Smith's going to join us in a second, because both of you guys have experience, you with your mayoralty, sort of in the back room of various political kind of decisions and that. So you always bring an extra perspective to these conversations. So I'm really looking forward to having you on. And I really appreciate you giving us some time tonight. So kia ora and welcome.
Kia ora.
Before we rip into the show, as always, let's say a huge thanks to all of our patrons. Love you guys to bits. Thank you so much for helping us do what we do. If you're interested in being a part of this, you can just head to patreon.com/Big Hearing News. What we try and do, Aaron, is we try and create Pat a problem. And the problem for Pat is too many names on the pages. Then I have to redesign it. So it's getting close again, because in the last 24 hours, Modi Ora joined the coffee runner level. Brennan and Matt Couldry joined the producer layer. So you can see the page is getting quite full. It's a problem that I have to then start to design a new billboard, but it's a problem we like to have. Just imagine if over Easter I just spend some of my time designing a new billboard for our patrons. Wouldn't that just be the biggest headache in the world? Anywho, many a jest be told in truth. Is that what they say? Something like that. So tonight we are talking about the BPS, the Budgetary Policy Statement, which was released tonight in a little nutshell of that. That normally comes out in about December of most years, but because the government was being formed last December, it's come out today, which is sort of a snapshot of what's to come. You know, here's some hints, team. Here's some hints about what's to come in the upcoming budget. Also, UN calls for a ceasefire finally. Now, that came through yesterday, but we couldn't fit it into the show, so we're going to talk about it today. And also, Destiny Church are now officially criminals. Well, some members of Destiny Church are now officially criminals. And we're going to have a look at, they actually have done, Aaron, I don't know if you've seen this, but they've actually done a great service to the rainbow community. A great service. And I'm being genuine about that. They've done something which has been, it's done something very good for the rainbow community, especially in Gisborne, which we'll get to in a wee while. They're called teasers, people to keep you around. So thanks for being with us. Appreciate you in the chat. Be nice to each other. We'll mention some of your vibes as we go through. If you've got anything specific, chuck it in there. And yeah, let's have a chat. Let's get into it right now. Bring Clint Smith into the show. Kia ora, Clint. Welcome to the show.
G'day, Pat.
G'day, Clint. And you guys know each other from sort of Green Days, back in the Green Day. Huh? Didn't do that. Back in the Green Days, literally. You've connected?
Yeah, indeed. But online, as most of our relationships have formed in the good old Twitter years, you know?
Yeah.
We used to have quite similar looks. When I had a few less pounds and he had some more hair on his chin, we looked quite similar.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm the only one that will be accused by the alt-right tonight of having a neck beard. I don't know what that means and why it's an insult, but just me. So you can feel good about that, Aaron, as well. Clint, before we show this, do you want to just give us a better synopsis of what the BPS actually is and why it comes out before the budget?
Sure. It's kind of the first indicator of what the budget in a given year is going to be like. It usually comes out, like you said, in December of the previous year, and at the same time as a thing called HAIFU, the half-year economic and fiscal update. And they usually come out, well, HAIFU says this is how the economy is going, this is where we think growth's going. And the budget policy statement, the core thing it says is this is how much extra money we have in the coming year we're planning to be putting into government services or tax cuts. It's a scene setter. It says there's basically this much money in the pot.
Right. And yeah, I'm interested as to why they don't really need to do it. Why do they do it? Because they could just tell us all this on budget day as well.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure it's part of the Public Finance Act that it has to be done. It's basically the first thing the finance minister has to produce for that part of the budgetary cycle really goes year round in the background with ministers and officials beavering away. And like I say, it usually comes out in December. It didn't last time, and it's not actually really because the government was formed late. The governments have been formed late in the year before, and they've usually got the BPS out. But I think we'll come to a discussion of some of the issues that the government's having around the BPS after we've seen the clip, maybe.
We'll do that. Before we do that, Aaron, seeing you were involved in local body politics to the sort of highest degree as the mayor, does this all vibe with you? Do you get a similar sense of doing local body budgetaries? Is that something that's handled by the mayor's office? How does that handle versus what we're going to talk about tonight, which is nationwide?
Well, it's slightly different. I mean, the local council, it's not a perfect analogy, but it's essentially cabinet. Right. So everyone on the council is a decision maker, and you're briefed by staff who are similarly working on the budget year round, and then eventually gets spat out as a draft in December, January for sign off, and then is subject to public submissions, which isn't the case in central government. There's no requirement in Wellington to consult on what they are proposing to do. They can just go and do it. It's one of many constraints or obligations that's put on local government that isn't the case in Wellington. But certainly it's a far more transparent and public process, budget setting at a local council level, than it is out of the beehive, for sure.
All right. So let's have a look at the story from One News tonight. We're just going to watch the first part of it. They do it in 3 parts, including different reporters doing different parts. But we'll just watch the first part of it because it gives quite a good synopsis of what we experienced today and what we're going to potentially expect with the upcoming election. So we'll check this out and then we'll come and have a chat about it. Here we go.
Tax cuts are still on the cards for New Zealanders, but they may look different to what was promised before the election. Finance Minister Nicola Willis today unveiled the government's spending priorities for this year's budget in May. They include tax reductions, savings from cost cutting across government departments, new spending on health, education and law and order, and long-term infrastructure investments. But where's the money coming from with the economic outlook weaker than expected? The amount of money allocated to fund new spending will be set at less than $3.5 billion for the May budget.
Can I ask you, Clint, because I'm ignorant to this, is that an average amount, big amount, small amount, if that's the budget, the operating allowance?
It's been running about $3.5 billion. Obviously, COVID has sort of mucked around with that, but $3.5 billion was the plan under the previous Labour government. Yeah.
So that's pretty standard.
And that was meant to, but it's really just enough to cover inflation.
Gotcha.
Not much else.
So it'll be going up with inflation, but it hovers around that mark for a while.
Every year the government gets extra money in because of inflation and because of GDP growth, and this is an allocation of that extra money towards new spending or tax cuts. And $3.5 billion is just about enough to cover inflation for education, health, those big major things, plus maybe a few smaller new programs.
And just because I'm being fair and I have my tongue in my cheek slightly, Aaron, like Dunedin City, their budget's around that as well, 3.5 billion. Is that what you kind of operate for? I mean, I before I moved to Dunedin, I heard a lot of complaints about the stadium and stuff. It felt like Dunedin was paying about 3.5 billion a year to operate. Is that about right?
I think the OPEX budget's about 350 million, okay, maybe. And about half of that money half of the revenue is collected through rates. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, let's keep going with the story.
Exact number to be revealed on the day. And with the forecast slowdown, pressure on household budgets and rising unemployment, the government's tax take is going to be lower, estimated to be cumulatively down nearly $14 billion in the next 5 financial years. And that means it'll now take longer for the Crown books to get back into surplus. For what it all means for you, our coverage begins with political editor Mikey Sherman.
Sam Summers runs a small business delivering food during the week, but...
This is a very good analogy. Sam's also a friend of the show. He watches and communicates with us a few times. This is a great analogy. We've all heard about the block of cheese budgets and those sorts of things. Sam does one stop better than this.
Along with today's onions, he also had this interpretation of his government tax cut.
So this is what the tax cuts represents to me.
He ran his salary through National's tax calculator.
For me, it is the equivalent of $2.15 a week or free Chubba Chup lollipops.
He says that sucks and the money for tax cuts should go elsewhere. The Finance Minister, though, is charging ahead.
I know New Zealanders at home are looking to us for certainty that tax relief is coming and it's coming soon because they need it.
The tax cut.
So here's a question for you, Clint, right? You're on the 9th floor, you're talking to the Prime Minister, you're talking with the Finance Minister, and you're selling this idea to the nation that the nation wants this because tax relief is on the way and tax cuts are coming. And then dude's saying, I get $2 a week. You know, how do you square that circle? How can the person making that message be so confident to say New Zealanders want this, New Zealanders need this, here's a gold coin? Like, how do you actually do that when you're sitting behind the scenes advising and writing speeches and stuff?
Well, in Nicola's case, what she did was say you get up to $250 a fortnight for families. And what that turned out was, she was counting fortnights where usually we talk about it in weeks. She's talking households where we usually talk individuals. And she was, this is a once in a blue moon family that they both have to have incomes of $65,000 and be spending $300 a week on ECE, I think it was.
Yeah.
So it turned out that, up to $250 a fortnight was doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, there was
when
a
you
lot
actually
of
break
heavy
the
lifting.
numbers, when you actually break down the numbers, 40% of taxpayers get the $2.15 that Sam was talking about there, and a quarter get nothing. But but political discourse tends to ignore people on low incomes anyway. So, they say person on the average full-time wage that is, gets $15 or $20 a week. And that gets duly reported, and everyone kind of ignores the fact that most of the population's getting 2 fists of bugger all.
Yeah, the ones who need it the most is the word you're looking for. Need it most, get nothing.
Chuppa-chups are on you.
Chuppa-chups are on you. Not to even, I'm sure there was some things sometimes, I don't know if you want to get into the details or not, that you had to kind of square a circle when you were working with Jacinda Ardern. I'm not even sure what there would be, but there's got to be. How do you approach this where you know that you're kind of only giving a half truth? You're making the message more palatable than maybe it is to everybody. I'm just assuming that happens to every political party.
Yeah. It certainly happened with some of the other Labour leaders I worked with. I think, the best thing always is not to have a crappy policy in the first place. So, sometimes you're not so blessed, and you have to, accentuate the positive. You have to be careful in those circumstances not to stretch the bounds of credibility, because then it bounces back on you. And I when I worked for Labour, I made tax calculators like this, and in 2017, I think a couple of other ones as well. And I was always mindful that people could put in any number and everyone's got to get something, right? So the fact that Nationals put up this calculator and Sam can go in there and go, I get $2, that sucks. Like that kind of says that they haven't really thought through, okay, what else can we say to Sam that we're going to offer him that's good? Maybe they don't have anything to offer him that's good.
Yeah. And we've got some lovely people at the moment. Mr. Arvids has decided to donate his tax cut to BHN with a $2 super chat. I appreciate that, Mr. Arvid. That's very generous of you. And, because you're one of the Kiwis that needs and is looking forward to that tax cut, and you chose to give your $2 to us. We appreciate that. All right, let's hear a bit more from the story.
It will be paid for from the government's operating budget, meaning it won't have to borrow extra.
It's coming, it's going to be responsible, and it's going to be meaningful as we promised you.
But a growing chorus of critics argue now's not the right time.
You're seeing even right-wing economists and commentators saying that their numbers don't add up and that they should be delaying these trickle-down tax cuts.
It's absolutely irresponsible to be providing tax cuts at the moment when the government aren't being honest with New Zealanders about what that means.
In order to help pay for...
Sorry, completely off topic. Was it just me, or was there a dude in a suit with dope leaves going up the suit behind him? just kind of noticed that last minute. Didn't notice it beforehand. That's the new version of the hemp suit that Nandor used to wear, going up behind him with his dope suit on.
Tax cuts at the moment when the government aren't being honest with New Zealanders about...
It's a whole new version of that's a dope suit, man. See what I did there?
What that means.
In order to help pay for tax cuts, the government signalled savings elsewhere, scrapping free public transport for young people, public service jobs, free ECE for 2-year-olds and free prescriptions, to name a few. The minister says health, education and law and order will get more funding in the May budget, but money for anything else will be tight.
Is it irresponsible of you to bring in tax cuts now?
No, it is the most responsible thing we can do.
Young public servant Morgan Kemp originally wanted a tax cut, but today's economic figures changed his mind.
When we're in a situation like we're in now, I just don't see how that's at all possible.
He's baffled the government's pushing ahead.
I think National actually risks losing its brand of fiscal responsibility if it decides to step down on this rake.
I tell you what, in this job, I expect to get criticism. That's okay, because my job is actually to deliver to the New Zealanders that are depending on us to run this economy well. My job is to keep our commitment to them, to give them tax relief.
Tax relief which is on its way come hell or high water.
All right, Mike. All right, here's a question for both of you, and we'll start with you, Aaron. We've got the whole story there. Mikey Sherman asked, is it irresponsible? Nicola Willis said it's the most responsible thing we can do. That's kind of either end of that story. Is it irresponsible? No, it's the most. Where would you put it on that continuum between irresponsible and it's actually the most responsible thing we're doing right now?
It's certainly hard to see how, if their stated objective is making life easier for people who are struggling, and that's the narrative, right? So New Zealanders need tax relief. We need to be relieved of our obligations because, rent's too high and food's too expensive and so on and so on. It stretches the credulity to breaking point that scrapping free prescriptions and making, doubling the cost of sending your kids to school on the bus if they have to take public transport to school, and scrapping commitments around early childhood education to fund, and the fact that it's mostly being funneled through to landlords is a narrative nightmare. Because people can see that they are being shortchanged by the decisions the government has made to give their landlord, and for increasing numbers of families who are living in rental accommodation in particular, they are seeing money being taken out of their pocket and given to their landlord. And it's hard to see how anybody could frame that as the most responsible thing our government could be doing.
Clint, what are your thoughts?
On the balance, this is a good option. Like, the most responsible thing we should be doing.
Like, there could be nothing more. There could not be 1 millimeter more of things I could do to make it even better than it is. Clint?
Yeah, look, I agree that the fact that they are having to increase charges to people to pay for tax cuts, it's how can that be responsible? And especially where those charges fall kind of comes down to kind of the luck of the draw. Does your kid take the bus to school? Do you have illnesses that you need prescriptions for? Those kind of things. But the money in the tax cuts is very, very targeted at upper and middle incomes, and so, I mean, again, right? Like, it's going to be those on lower incomes who are going to find themselves facing higher charges and lower government subsidies for the costs that they face in their life, and also that people who are already on $70K a year get $20 a week, which they won't notice because it's like 50 cents an hour, you know.
And if Sam, who had the Chupa Chop example, comes along and saves us $2.50, but he happens to have 2 or 3 kids going to school taking the bus, he's actually down 20, 30, $40 a week from the bus travel, but he'll get $2.50 a week back. So this government will say, promise succeed. It's exactly the promise we said, although technically he's worse off by multiples of 10 per week because of the other changes they've made.
And its minimum wage hasn't kept up with inflation.
Yeah. Aaron?
And none of this is a surprise. You know, I mean, I'm sure Craig Rennie doesn't enjoy being the rightest man on the left, but, you know, all of this was spelled out by the CTU in particular before the election. You know, people went in and voted eyes wide open as to how wildly improbable, you know, Mike Riddell, for God's sake, coming out and saying this isn't going to work the way that you say it's going to work. And sure enough, it isn't working the way that they said it's going to work. And I think people are cottoning on to the fact that they couldn't find a talking head, a vox pop for that story saying this is a good idea. Tells you, and they certainly would have tried. It tells you everything you need to know, I think.
That's a very good measure, actually, Aaron, because not only would they have tried, if we've actually heard complaints from Winston Peters, maybe David Seymour, they're the same person, before saying we gave the press our contacts and they chose to go. So if the government had people to go to say go and tell, they would have also let the press. So if the press couldn't find someone and the government couldn't say there's someone, then that's actually quite a good yardstick. The other obvious question is, we heard there's going to be $13.9 billion less income for the government over the next 5 years. If you work that out, that's about $2.8 billion per year. Can someone remind me how much they're giving back to landlords? Was that was $2.9 billion per year? So the revenue's going down by $2.8 billion, and they're giving back $2.9 billion. Perhaps that's one of the reasons many economists are saying this is the wrong time, because we don't have to be in deficit. You just have to not give those tax breaks back. Would that be fair, Clint?
Yeah. Look, they've put themselves in a real bind with these landlord tax cuts. The law for them passed today. So they didn't do it as part of the budget. They decided to do it early so they could give them the tax cuts from April 1. And by taking on this enormous cost for the landlord tax cuts, they've reduced the amount of we call fiscal headroom, the amount of money sloshing around that they have to play with. And they've committed to keeping up, core public services with inflation, health and education. They've committed to these tax cuts, and it doesn't add up. And so that's why they're searching around for cuts. And you're starting to see that they're starting to do things that are politically not tenable. That those disability cuts that were announced last week, what that was the ministry had announced a new way of helping out people who need some respite and some assistance with their disabled kids. It went over budget, but new programs go over budget. And the minister goes cap in hand to the finance minister, goes, look, very sorry, this is more expensive than planned, but we'll sort that out for next year, but can we have some money to tide over for the rest of the year? Nicola Willis got that memo, and rather than address it as a matter of urgency, she put it into the budget pile. And before she knew it, Penny Simmons was out there saying no more money for disabled families. And so this is, why is there no money? It's because they've stretched themselves too thin with these tax cuts.
What do you make of the theory, though, Clint, that it's the public service laying out landmines for the government? The idea that because they're being asked to cut so much from their operating budgets, they're just throwing wildly unpalatable things in kind of retribution. knowing that once they get, that example has, once they get an airing, they'll get fixed.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't not believe that the public service is capable of thinking that through and saying, you know, if we've been asked to make deep cuts, we're going to show that it's not as easy as you might think. So yeah, you know, you know, as mayor, you would have helped put together budgets and been in the same situation with officials suggesting things that might have been politically untenable, but they would have said, well, if you want to cut the money, cut this. I'm sure.
The other question to ask, and it sort of bounces off the back of budgets, and we're going to keep saying this all the way through the year when people like David Seymour saying, we just can't afford this, we just can't afford this. The money's not there to afford it. It's not the case. It's that they're choosing not to pay for it. They're making choices to give money back to landlords and not pay for things. So, you know, the lunch in schools is a perfect example. They can easily afford that. You know, 300 million a year, whatever it was, they're giving back 2.9 billion. And now we're also hearing, and I'm interested in your guys' take on this, about the new way that ECE centres are going to get funding to their parents to pay for ECE by 400,000 invoices going into IRD at a time where the government is telling IRD to cut back. But they're going to need a whole new workload to cover these 400,000 invoices to then rebate them to the parents 4 times a year. Oh no, that's 400,000. That's because it's 100,000 families, so 400,000 in the year. And it feels like they've got to a point already where we've gone, I don't really care if this looks stupid. We're just doing what we want to do. You know.
That is the most cynical thing I've heard. Not from you, from the government actually. That is the ECE stuff. Like, you couldn't, if someone asked you to design a funding mechanism that was less likely to be taken up by people who were entitled to it and needed it, you know, you couldn't do a better job than this. I mean, please pay in advance for 3 months and then file your accounts with the IRD and then wait for your. I mean, who's got the money to do that? When you're covering your expenses on a week-to-week basis, you don't. You know, it's like the old arguments people would have about electric cars, and they'd say, "Oh, it pays for itself over time." Well, it doesn't, but that doesn't pay for it, does it? So, you know, the idea that everyone's going to have the money to spend on early childhood to then get rebated by the IRD. I mean, people just aren't going to bother, or they're going to more likely bow out of early childhood because they don't have the cash on a week-to-week basis to cover it. And trying to sell that as a support mechanism for families is wild to me.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know who does have the money up front and who will take the time because they'll get the most back is the people on high incomes who are already spending the most on childcare. The average family that has spending on childcare, which is about, I think, half of families with kids in the age range. The average family only spends $80 a week. So under this policy, they'll get $20 back when they have, you know, give their invoice in eventually. But there are 20,000 families who are spending $300 or more a week. They're the ones that get $75 a week. And they're the what, you know, they're obviously got decent incomes already if they're spending $300 a week on childcare. So again, it's a policy that, you know, favors those who are well off and who know how these systems operate, you know, who have you know, the familiarity with government to do those things. And like you say, Pat, like when that cost of living payment came in, IRD had to hire several hundred people to deal with those cost of living payments, and that wasn't going through receipts and adding it all up. This will be a monstrous task.
What can we expect to see in the budget that we don't know about today, Clint?
I think there's going to be some kind of surprise in terms of new revenue, as the government is sort of bloodlessly referring it to, because
you mean more levies, but no taxes, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's no new tax, they've said, but a levy is technically not a tax, and the government charges things as well, and it also can impose co-payments. So, for example, you know, we're expecting the prescription charges to come back. Nobody says there has to be only $5 though. What if it was $10 or $15? That would raise more revenue for the government. As it stands, it doesn't add up for them. And I think that if they cut back on the tax cuts or spread them out over time, that would make a joke of them. Or I'm going to get my $2 a week in installments over 3 years. So that doesn't work. So they're going to have to find new revenue and deeper cuts to make it balance. And it'll be something we don't expect. Like, I don't think anyone was thinking that Simeon Brown was going to increase regos by $50 a year. That kind of came out of left field as well. So it'll be something like that.
I saw some other commentary. It might have been News Hub today. There might have even been one, but further down that story that we didn't watch, who basically also said the reason that this early look and these hints towards the budget is a bit loosey-goosey is they still don't know themselves yet, because they're still chasing where that money is going to come from. And so it feels a bit looser than your normal December release has been. Aaron, you thinking anything?
Yeah, but also they didn't do the work in the lead up to the election. I mean, their entire policy platform since October has been stopping things and repealing things. And they haven't done the policy development work that they could get, which is why you don't see something like this happening in December, because in December they would have had no idea what the situation was going to be. And I think the lightweight nature of the policy program is becoming more and more evident.
All right.
And I think there's a real I was just going to say, I think there's a real conflict between the parties over this. That speech that Winston Peters gave a couple of weeks ago, where he overshadowed what he was actually trying to say by talking about Nazi Germany. What he was actually doing was giving a signal to his coalition partners that he wasn't prepared to give way on his values and his priorities in the budget. So that tells you that behind closed doors, they're sitting down and going, we're going to have to do spending cuts or we're going to have to cut back on things that Winston Peters won't agree to. And so I think that's one reason that I think actually is the reason why we still don't have an operating allowance, is that the parties between themselves cannot agree.
Yeah. All right. Hey, Clint, thanks so much for joining us tonight for a little bit to talk about stuff that I know nothing about. So it's good to have you on board and give us your experience. We appreciate that. And we'll look forward to seeing, it feels a bit like a guessing game of whose magic 8 ball was correct when it comes to actual budget time and what is in and what is out. Maybe we'll get something really unexpected, like banning smoking again. I don't know. Maybe they'll enforce smoking. They'll make everyone start smoking, and then they'll get their tax take that way. Maybe that's the next step from here on in, Clint.
There we go. It could be.
All right, dude. All the best. Thank you, sir.
Cheers, mate.
There you go, Aaron. Got anything else you want to touch on before we have a look at some of the chats that have come in?
No, I once had a dream about the budget, and I swear to God, it was the most. And I don't usually remember my dreams, but I remembered it. Like it did me dirty by making me remember that I had a dream about the budget, and really
was it a sexy dream? Was it a sexy dream about the budget?
I won't tell you who the Minister of Finance was at the time. No.
Oh. I heard Nicola Willis say at the press conference today, I'm Nicola Willis and I hate, I don't know if she said hate, but she was basically saying, stop comparing me to every female finance minister before that. And I just thought, well, stop being like Ruth Richardson then, you mug. It's like if you're gonna be like the person in action, then you're gonna compare to the person whether they be male or female. Yeah.
It feels very early 90s, doesn't it? Which is super grim.
Let's have a look at some of the chats that have come in. Thank you for your super chat, Frosty. Frosty says, speaking of national incompetence, were we? I guess we were. Did you see the Nats hiring their old school MPs? Yep. Stephen Joyce, Bill English, Simon Bridge. Yeah, we might touch on that tonight. There's a story that's on the internet. There's only about 2 minutes long. We might have a look at that. Although, yeah, the thing is, they all kind of do that. And if you're going to be generous, you'd say because they know people, they bring in people they know. Labor does that as well. But the difference with this time round is that Nationals giving jobs to their mates at a time where they're firing a whole bunch of public servants. When Labour gives like the Ireland ambassadorial ship to Mallard, they're not in the process of firing a whole bunch of public servants at the time. So it does feel, even though I think both sides do it on some level, it does feel very different when this government's saying, get out public servant, hey, come in, friends. Get out public servant, hey, come in, friends. That does feel a bit different.
Yeah, and maybe someone who's whose other jobs include advocating for the trucking lobby isn't the best chair of your transport agency? I don't know.
Maybe we'll have a look at that. Peter with the $2 super chat. Oh, he gave us his tax break. This is on the level of Liz Truss. But the thing about Liz Truss, she was gone in, what was it, 90 days or 60 days? Or
very efficient, ruthlessly efficient.
Ruthlessly. Ruthlessly. I don't know what this is. ArchX. It's talked about stealing lunches from schools. The proletariats come up and said, just appreciate y'all and what you are doing with a $3.50 super chat. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. And this one says, people like Nicola Willis with 4 kids. This must have been at a time where we were talking about who's going to get these breaks. People like Nicola Willis, well, who's got 4 kids. And remember also a several $100,000 salary to go along with that. It's in the ballot for a $2.15 super chat. Appreciate that. And Sarah says, Nicolia, your tax cuts are an April Fool's joke. Watch benefits get cut. Yeah. I get the sentiment and I get the fear around that. I personally don't think they'll go that far, but who saw smoke-free 2025 disappearing, Aaron? Who saw that who had that on their bingo card? Like no one? No one.
Not me.
Okay, let's have a look at the Israel-Gaza situation. This is a story, I think technically from last night. I don't know if that's true or not. We'll find out as we go through it. Where One News was talking about what had just happened. And the big news to do with this is that the UN for this whole conflict has refused to pass any kind of statement of ceasefire. Now, the reason for that is some of the countries have been blocking it. The US has been blocking it. The US has been saying, their veto rights. This time they abstained, and so it got through. Oh gosh, I was only about to say, and all hell broke loose. I don't think you could say that in relation to this, because kind of all hell has already broken loose for about 9 months in Gaza, so we won't use that analogy. Let's have a look at the story. If it feels like playing. Anytime it's ready. I'll just refresh that page in case TVNZ has changed a few things. Da-dee-da-dee-da, and then go again.
Israel is fuming after traditional ally, the US, paved the way for a UN resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Israel reacting by cancelling a diplomatic visit to Washington because a temporary truce being proposed doesn't depend on its hostages being released. US correspondent Logan Church reports.
Painful last goodbyes after an Israeli airstrike killed 18 Palestinians in one house, according to Gazan medics. The way Israel is prosecuting its war on Hamas, the soaring death toll, the millions at risk of famine, has caused a seismic shift in the US, away from one of its closest allies.
Please raise their hand.
Today, for the first time, not one of the UN Security Council members used their veto to strike down a resolution, calling for an immediate ceasefire, the release of Israeli hostages held by Hamas, and the urgent expansion of humanitarian aid. The US essentially allowing the resolution to pass by abstaining.
Certain key edits were ignored, including our request to add a condemnation of Hamas.
Israel is furious at the UN because it did not make a ceasefire dependent on the release of hostages.
It undermines the efforts to secure their release.
Israel's also furious at its most powerful ally, the US, for not using its veto power to stop this resolution.
It does feel, Aaron, a little bit like, if you are someone who is, let's say, conspiracy adjacent. I've got friends who are in there. I agree with some of the things. I agree that the mandates didn't need to come because the closing of the businesses weren't the case, but, the anti-masking was a bit ridiculous. They're kind of adjacent. That what happens in the conspiracy world is if you're not 100% supportive, then you're the enemy. So when they say at Israel is that how angry they are with the US, it's like this is one of the first times the US has ever kind of gone 3 steps the other way. They haven't gone against Israel. They've just kind of gone, we're just going to pause in this moment. And that because Israel doesn't have 100% support by the US, then now Israel is angry and they're grumpy with the US because it feels a bit like it's either all or nothing to that narrative. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think it's hard to overstate how significant this is, though. I mean, the the support, unquestioning, often support of the Israeli state is like a third rail for American politics. I mean, I think it shows how bad things are looking for Biden's re-election campaign because of the overwhelming public support that is being generated in support of a ceasefire and the plight of the Palestinian people, that it's been allowed to get this far where they won't use veto in the Security Council. I mean, I certainly didn't see that coming.
And it's one of the weaknesses of the left in America. One of the strengths, I think, of places like New Zealand, although the left is a bit weak at the moment, numbers-wise, but because we've got a centre-left party and a left party, because that's all in one party, so you can only vote for the Democrats if you're a lefty in America. That means the progressive left are all threatening not to vote for Biden because of what he's done to support Israel, or at least to not condemn Israel, which means if there is 10% of the party that just won't vote for you now because of Israel and Gaza conflict, like in a place like New Zealand, they'd probably be more likely to be Green voters anyway, and Labour would still have their voters. So it shows the weakness, I think, of having a broad church within the American political establishment, that if the far left within the Democrats don't like you anymore, they may sit at home and not vote, which is a concern because, what's their other option?
Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of issues with a two-party state.
Yeah.
And people would make arguments about a pre-MMP situation in New Zealand where, the argument is we always had coalition governments, but they were called Labour and National, and the kind of internal factional holding of those things together was sort of analogous to how we now have multi-party arrangements that are in government. But I mean, apathy and turnout from disaffected voters in a two-party system is a significant risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, WD, for the super chat. Just a $3.50 super chat. We'll keep going with the story.
Today, Israel's leader cancelling a planned visit by a high-level Israeli delegation to the White House.
There's more of this to come. We'll get into what the fallout, what's happened since then. So they've cancelled a trip to the White House yesterday, and there's more to come.
A hugely symbolic move in a widening rift between the two long-term friends. Israel's reaction and its claim the US is abandoning its mandatory hostage release policy, apparently surprising American officials.
We're kind of perplexed by this. The Prime Minister's office seems to be indicating through public statements that we somehow changed here. We haven't.
But the real question here is what difference this resolution will make for the people of Gaza.
We want a ceasefire that allows us to return to our homes. We're displaced. We need food and healthcare. We've become sick. We want safety.
The UN can do little to force nations like Israel to comply with its resolutions. For all the symbolism, it's only substance that counts.
So there you go. What I also want to do is show a little bit of video straight from the decision-making room from the UN. It's what news agency is this from? It's from Al Jazeera, and so it's been prepared as a piece to watch. So there's music and stuff behind it, but just to show you a bit more about actually what went on in the room when they made the vote yesterday.
The draft resolution has been adopted.
Sorry, and what I'll do as well, because obviously this is an audio podcast at times, is I'll actually read out the text that comes across. I apologise for anyone watching if it annoys you, but our brothers and sisters who only have ears, we've got to treat them well as well. So I'll read out the subtitles for the video. It says the UN Security Council has demanded immediate ceasefire in Gaza
27-28
for the duration of Muslims' holy month of Ramadan that ends in 2 weeks.
Life must prevail in Gaza.
That's the Palestinian ambassador.
Prevail in Gaza. Freedom must prevail in Palestine. For 6 months now, every single Palestinian in Gaza has endured untold suffering, loss, pain, and tragedy. This must stop now.
The resolution also demands the release of all captives held by Hamas.
Abstention.
The 14-0 vote was adopted after the US abstained. The US has used its veto power 3 times to block previous ceasefire calls. Israel called the vote a travesty and has pledged to continue the war. Good on you.
This council, Israeli blood is cheap.
I just want to pause it there. That's the Israeli ambassador, for those who are listening, saying that Israeli blood is cheap. The Israeli ambassador is saying Israel's blood is cheap. Does he have any idea how many people have died in Gaza? If Israel's blood is cheap, what does that mean that the price of the blood in Gaza is worth? I don't know what the exact ratio, what is it? 50 to 1, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1 deaths on the other side? So if Israel's blood is cheap, that means Gaza is about 1/1,000th of the price of Israel's blood. It's a disgusting thing to say.
This is a travesty, and I'm disgusted.
All resolutions of the Security Council are international law, which makes the vote legally binding, but the US downplayed this.
We fully support some of the critical objectives in this non-binding resolution, and we believe it was important for the Council to speak out and make clear that our ceasefire any ceasefire must come with the release of all hostages.
Israel has ignored Security Council resolutions in the past. The Security Council says it wants the vote to lead to a lasting ceasefire. Many fear dropping the word permanent from this resolution would allow Israel to resume its war after Ramadan regardless. Hamas has welcomed the vote and called on Israel to commit to the ceasefire.
This must be a turning point. This must lead to saving lives on the ground. This must signal the end of this assault of atrocities against our people. A nation is being murdered. A nation is being dispossessed. A nation is being displaced for decades now, but never at this scale since the Nakba.
The resolution comes after nearly 6 months of war in Gaza, during which more than 32,000 Palestinians have been killed. And that would be the end of the video from Al Jazeera. Thoughts, Aaron?
I'm finding it quite overwhelming, to be honest. The whole situation. It is so unimaginably horrific. And, you know, that it's got as far as it has, that it's shifted American foreign policy in the region, tells you how obvious it is to how many people that it is so unimaginably horrific.
Yeah.
You know, you can't starve a people into extinction. And there is a reason why the Irish have led a lot of this work, because, you know, the Irish experience and the Palestinian experience, both, you know, with significant English legacies, are, you know, have very strong parallels. You know, this is, you know, the Irish famine is one of the great misnomers of our time, and it was a similar thing. You know, just being starved to death by your colonizer. It's horrific stuff. Yeah.
What we've heard since then as well, some more news for you, is Israel has now scrapped peace talks with Hamas after the UN ceasefire vote. So not only does it look like they're going to ignore the resolution, but they've actually gone the other way. There were some form of peace talks coming that that Israel has now scrapped. Also, there was a better story than this on One News about this topic, because it had video and a bit more explanation, but let me try and explain it to you. This is also happening. One of the reasons that they're desperate to get aid in through the borders rather than airdrops, as at least 12 Palestinians drowned trying to retrieve aid parcels dropped into the sea. So what's happening is aid is coming into Gaza, and for those of you who are watching, that's literally the aid, those dozens of parachutes being dropped down. But what's happening is it got blown out into the sea, or some of them did, and people are so desperate to get the food and get the supplies that they're swimming out to get them, to bring them back. And some of them, through attempting to find food to feed themselves and other supplies, probably medicine and stuff as well, are drowning, are dying because of it. So it's one of the reasons that part of this resolution, it's so important to get the land borders open and allow supplies to come into Gaza, because the way that it's happening at the moment. I think even Hamas has said, please stop dropping supplies that way. And I think America has said, well, we have to keep doing it because there's no other way at the moment. I think there are a couple of I thinks, but we can check that out for ourselves. But yeah, you can see the desperation in people where they are basically putting their life at risk, and some of them having their lives taken to swim 100 meters offshore to get a parcel of food to feed their family, Aaron.
Yeah, or you're told that you can go to this point and collect flour and rations, and so you turn up there and you get massacred by the IDF. I mean, what confidence can you have in any aid delivery system? But but you're right. The sheer desperation overrides anything else, and so of course you can expect people to put themselves back in that situation on the off chance that this is legit.
I mean, am I going to starve to death and die in 7 days from now, or am I going to give it a go to get some food now? Maybe I'll lose my life, but if I don't do this, I've probably lost it anyway. That's the choice they're having to make.
Yeah, I can't conceive of the arithmetic that people have to do on an hourly basis in a situation like that. And it's like half the population of Palestine is under 18.
Yeah,
these are children. And that was one of the most galling things when the Israeli state tries to paint them as a population of terrorists. I mean, they are children, fundamentally.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't want to sound too depressing or be too dramatic, but I think the accurate thing to say is half of the population before this war started, this invasion started, were children. I wonder what the numbers are going to be on the other side. We have to wait and see, which is even more depressing to say out loud.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for being involved. There's lots of people in the chat. As we know, when Chewie is not here, the chat gets not ignored, people, but it's harder to stay up. Kiwi Bird said there's a port being in Gaza is being built. I'm just having a flick through. And can I just say, for people who are saying,
is it the port that they're building? Is it the port that they're building literally out of the rubble of the buildings that had been flattened?
Yeah, I think that's what I've heard as well. Yeah. And for the people in there who are saying things about playing whataboutism, what about we talk about America in this area of the world? What about this area? It's like they're not invalid conversations, but just because you're focusing on one area at the moment and talking about one area doesn't negate the other areas we're going to talk about. It's a little bit like I've always said, someone who stands up for breast cancer and raises money for breast cancer, they're not saying fuck you colon cancer. They're just focusing on that at the moment. And then it doesn't make the other position invalid or still as important, but it's okay to focus on one at a time and not have to play whataboutism to say, well, no, okay, so we won't talk about any of them then to keep you guys happy, or we'll talk about all of them and not give enough attention to any one. Let's just stay real with this. Okay, okie dokie. Let's have a look at a story. It's quite a quick one, actually, I think. Let's have a look at a story that we started last night. We are continuing on today, and as I said to you earlier, Destiny Church has done a huge service to the rainbow community in Gisborne. And the reason they've done a service, done something good, is if you're watching the video, on the left-hand side here is what members of Destiny Church did yesterday when they painted over the rainbow street walkover crossing. Now, what they've done in doing that is they've given a new clean background for it to be repainted, which it was today, and it absolutely pops. Like, the repainting of it looks 1,000 times better than what it was yesterday. So on some level, I think we have to thank Destiny Church for giving a new canvas for a new rainbow flag to be painted in Gisborne that looks exponentially better than the crossing yesterday. We talked a bit about this yesterday, Aaron. I'm going to talk about it tonight as well, a couple of things that have happened, but you went with us last night. You got anything you want to share about the story that's been going around the internet the last 24 hours?
It's
that was a big sigh.
It's just so sad to me that these are the things that people choose to let themselves get so wound up about. Someone in drag reading at a library. and the point's been well made by many people. If you list all of the drag performers in recent history in this country who've been convicted of crimes against children, and then list next to that a list of all the religious leaders who have been convicted of the same, it's a very one-sided affair if you're talking about things you might want to steer your children away from. But, the irony isn't lost on me that a small army of people turn up on motorbikes all dressed in leather, which has certainly never been something of interest to same-sex couples and queer culture, like extras on a Kenneth Anger film or what have you. But look, it's just so exhausting, this kind of wholesale imported culture war nonsense that is perpetrated by, in this case, professional grifters, enlisting people who should know better, enlisting people to their cause for the purposes of making money. Not a lot of $3.50 super chats in the bishop's tin.
I don't know if you were specifically referencing my Twitter feed, but this is one I put up there today. Hey, Brian Timing, let's play a game. Let's play child sex offenders in the drag community versus the church community. We'll keep sharing names till one of us runs out. I'll start. Graham Capel, your turn. I didn't hear anything from Brian, so I don't know. There was one commenter in this thread today who said something like, what's the rationale behind the two communities though? And someone said, one of them's inclusive and loving and the other is a church, which I thought was quite a good response to the thing. And this is obviously doctored, but I thought there's a photo from my Twitter feed that we could share if we wanted for any particular reason. Yeah, it's been
interesting. I've seen David Seymour's response to this, basically saying, this kind of false equivalence that so you don't like your events being shut down by Destiny's Church, therefore the left have no right trying to deplatform people who are giving speaking tours and what have you. The thugs veto, as he calls it, and it's a false equivalence because one is punching up and one is punching down. There's a fundamental difference between somebody who is organizing a public event that is, as you say, built around inclusivity and supporting people, and it's a very different situation to people who are going around preaching hate, basically, and trying to turn people into victims and create and reinforce those sorts of power structures. I don't think you can compare those things directly. Tolerance and intolerance, to me, are fundamentally different things.
But I also, on an absolutely base level, don't have a problem with people being loud and disruptive and stuff at a protest. Don't have a problem with that, either side doing it. I do have a problem, and they don't watch us, but if they were watching us, I'd go, well, what about the people who threw punches at Parky Oposa? We denounced them. We said that there should be charges if there was crimes committed. One of the differences with this one is the protest was a crime. The protest of painting over the thing was a crime. At the Posey Parker thing, with a similar kind of vocal opposition, how there, I mean, like they were found not guilty in court or whatever, but it looked like some crimes were committed there, whereas this one, the actual protest of painting that out was a crime. And we go on to the story today, where today 5 people have been arrested with paint cans after a rainbow crossing in Gisborne was restored following its defacement by protesters on Monday evening. Earlier,
how do you arrest someone with a paint can?
Well, I guess they were gonna commit a crime, I guess.
They really should have put them away. If they didn't want to get arrested, you really should put the paint cans away, I think, first.
Yeah, I think all those kids that used to put them down the back of their pants, the spray bottle, so you couldn't see them. So earlier, Destiny Church protesters had filmed themselves covering the Pride-themed crossing with white paint in protest at a Rainbow Storytime event being held at the city's library. In a statement this evening, a police spokesman told One News 5 people had been arrested following a protest on Gladstone Road. At around 4 p.m, a group of protesters returned to the previously damaged and newly repainted Rainbow Crossing with paint cans and blocked the road. So that's probably why they were arrested. The group were arrested for preparing to commit a crime. Police are continuing to investigate yesterday and today's event and are considering any next steps. The council this afternoon released images of the crossing fixed after it was defaced on Monday, with Mayor Rochette Stoltz saying she was thrilled it had been repainted so quickly. This shows inclusivity and how dedicated we are to our whole community. Stoltz said the council was working with police to make those involved accountable and is also seeking reparations for the cost of the work, as they should. In a statement yesterday, Stoltz said, "We accept that people hold different views, but there is no place for hate or bigotry." And not that this is particularly good video, but here's maybe 18 seconds of someone who filmed it, and you'll see a couple of Destiny Church people get taken away, and actually resisting as well. Big guy here in the middle of the screen, he resists, so there could be a secondary charge. Yeah, there we go. Resisting, that would be resisting. That would be resisting, you're seeing right now. And as he goes around, he puts his foot up on a chair. That would be resisting as well, right there. That would be resisting. So, yeah, could be more charges to follow. It is a crazy time, and just... We had Paul Barlow with us a couple of nights ago on Monday, and he was saying that he grew up around a lot of drag queens, a lot of performers, and he explained that to do that kind of public work with children in a library, you have to go through the same sorts of checks, police checks, that kind of stuff, as you do to run a brownie group or something like that. So the idea of this is some kind of nefarious action to sexualize children from deviants, from miscreants, couldn't be further from the truth. The other thing is, someone said in one of my tweets following today, said some libraries in New Zealand, maybe once a year, for maybe 30 minutes, have dress up time with drag queens to read stories. If you really think that's going to indoctrinate your children into a lifestyle you disagree with, probably says more about your parenting than it does anything else.
God forbid. I saw an exhibition of Fiona Clark's work at the Southland Museum and Art Gallery, who has taken a lot of photos of Karangahape Road, cabaret scene in the 70s and onwards. And there was a great, and everywhere the show went, there were outraged letters to the editor, you'll be shocked to know. And one of my favorite ones in Invercargill was a woman writing about how she wanted to take her grandchildren to see the tuatara, and had to, and I'm paraphrasing now, do some parenting on the way through by explaining, I had to explain a picture that my grandchild looked at the museum. It's like, well, you probably should be able to do that. Like, why should we absolve you of the work of explaining to your children or grandchildren how the world is, or how it could look? But the whole thing is a carbon copy of the satanic panic, manufactured issue around homosexuality. It's just moved on to a different element of the queer community, because it's harder to muster the enthusiasm around these days. It's nothing new, and again, it's this wholesale imported American religious right culture war nonsense. And I know that this is far from the point, but you can't underestimate, just thinking about, because there are libraries and public institutions, you can't underestimate the drag on resourcing for the council in Gisborne that this would have been over the last week. And if people are concerned about their rates being efficiently spent, then tying up resources in this sort of movement is not the way of achieving that.
Very good. A message here, I just want to put this out there in case other people have seen it. Sean Plunkett permanently suspended from Twitter. I don't know what that means, because I have just looked up Sean Plunkett's. I don't follow Sean Plunkett, but he's still there on Twitter. So I'm not sure what you're meaning, JK, unless you mean just kidding. For your $2 super chat, thank you for that. And Proletariat again says a donation against the bishop. Nice, like that one. $8.99 against the bishop. What would be the number? I don't know. Something 40 to do against the bishop.
$6.66.
$6.66. There you go. Like that one as well. And yes, I know the story that you guys are talking about. Do you know the story for slaying Cam Slater? Sean Plunkett earlier in the week compared Down syndrome children, or dolphins, to Down syndrome children, And even Sean Plunkett went so far that he had to do a grovelling apology today, and Cam Slater is involved with getting him raked over the coals. But then again, when Sean Plunkett has to walk something back, you know how far gone that really must be. We might look at that. I don't do that. Look, I'll even show you. I wasn't going to do it. Look, I've even got it. Look, see? I've even got it up here somewhere. That one. Yeah, see, I've even got it there. But I just thought, as much as I'd love to play it for you, Aaron, this is, you guys know this is a chewy topic. You guys know this in the chat. This is a chewy topic to have a crack at Sean Plunkett. So we'll probably do that tomorrow night. If I did that,
I'd never do it justice. No.
Chewy was grumpy that we did so much on Winston Peters last week when he was at the Fringe Festival. But that was just a part of it. Imagine what Chewy would do to us if we talked about Plunkett tonight and his grovelling apology. That would just be a tragedy. All right. Hey, thanks for coming in tonight, Aaron. Did you go to any of the Fringes last week? Did you see anything?
Thanks, Pat. I didn't, unfortunately. I was a very poor arts patron. Sorry, Chewy.
It's been great to have you on. We'd love to have you around again. You know me, I text you all the time saying, can you talk to us about Three Waters? And it's never really worked out. Now that we're here and we've got you, we're not even talking about Three Waters. Because
here's a lengthy explanation of how the rating system works.
Okay.
If you want to put the chat to sleep.
We're not doing that now. It's been fun. Team Chewy was back tomorrow night. He just another family do on tonight. And thank you, Aaron, for being a part of what we're doing. Appreciate your time and appreciate you giving us some of your thoughts and stuff tonight.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, team. We'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for our last show before Easter. Be safe, everyone. Remember, come back tomorrow night, bring a friend. We'll see you then. Hooroo.